Hello, welcome to English 10B Unit 6. This is audio number 13 with myself, Miss Amador. I will be recording a review for you for our first unit test to be taken the next time you come into class. So let's get right into it. You will need a piece of paper. I'm going to be collecting before you take the test. So you do not need to, I'll be basically answering these questions that you see in front of you. You see this is the directions. This is basically a study guide that I'm going to be working through with you. So go ahead and pause so that way you can get a piece of paper and write down just the answers. So the directions read, rewrite the direct characterization statements using indirect characterization that portrays the stated characteristics. So if you remember in class some of the ways that we analyze text, remember the 6 posters that we had around the room? One had to do with characterization, and sometimes things are directly stated. Other times the author might be descriptive and show us rather than just tell us, and then from that we can make inferences based on that regarding a particular character. So number 1 says, my sister is sneaky in the morning. So that's direct. The author is telling us specifically about the character, the sister in this case, that she is sneaky. So a way that we can rewrite this sentence and change it to indirect characterization could be by saying that the sister's doing something. So my sister, let's see, tiptoes past our parents' room in the morning. Okay, so again, this is showing us rather than telling us the character is now involved in some sort of action that allows the reader to determine more about her. So the fact that my sister tiptoes past our parents' room in the morning seems like she's trying to be sneaky. She's trying to get into her room without her parents noticing or hearing her. So number 2 says, Terry was ill after eating lunch. So again, direct characterization. The author's directly telling us about this character, Terry. So why don't we change it to Terry looked, again in action, after eating his lunch. Sorry, Terry looked pale after eating his lunch. So again, this description given by, well, now we are the writer, is telling the reader that Terry must be sick, must be ill. If someone looks pale in the face, yellow, little yellow face or a little lighter than normal, not healthy, rather pale looking, then that's going to tell us that this character is sick without directly telling us Terry is sick or Terry was ill. Number 3, Hannah was loud when she spoke on the phone. Very direct information about this character, Hannah. We can change it to, you could hear Hannah from the kitchen when she spoke to her boyfriend on the phone. Okay, so again, this is using sensory language, using imagery. We're using our 5 senses here. You could hear Hannah from the kitchen when she spoke to her boyfriend on the phone. So from that detail, we can make the inference that she's loud, that she was loud when she spoke on the phone without directly stating the obvious. Number 4, write an example of a hyperbole. So you remember I gave you the study guide. Hyperbole is exaggeration for effect, in which a writer describes something as if it were much greater than it is. So an example of an hyperbole, you can write any one that comes to your mind. I've given one in class and I'll write another one. Okay, I'm starving. My stomach feels like an empty cave. Like there's nothing in my stomach whatsoever. It's empty. So earlier in class I mentioned that I was so hungry I could eat a cow, but obviously that is an exaggeration because I could only probably eat a hamburger. Number 5, write in an example of an understatement. So if you remember, an understatement, a writer uses understatements to portray a person, an event, or an idea as if it was much less than it is. So an example I can use, I know we talked about the avalanche in class. That would be definitely inconvenient for a hiker. We could say the towing fee was a minor inconvenience for my unemployed brother. Well, if you're not making money, you don't have an income because you're unemployed, you don't have a job, then if you were to receive a towing ticket, then that would obviously be very inconvenient for you. So the next part reads the directions. Below is an excerpt from The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. Answer the questions below using the passage. So follow along with me as I read. It says, knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her, in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing her husband's friend Richards was there, too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. So the question reads, after reading sentence 1, make an inference as to what will happen to Mrs. Mallard at the end of the story. And then the second question, why do you think that way? So let's go back to read the first sentence and see if we can make an inference or a guess based on details and events in the story. It says, knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with heart trouble, great care was taken to break the news to her regarding her husband's death. So what would you say? You can pause, think about this, write your own answer. The answer that I will provide for you would be that Mrs. Mallard, we would make the inference that she would die because the author hints that she has health issues. Okay, so I know that was a little convoluted there. Notice I used a vocabulary word, but it seemed a little confusing. I'm not too sure where this text was taken from. It reads a little awkward, but after that first sentence, we can make that inference that Mrs. Mallard will die because of the author hinting that she had these issues with her heart. Okay, she had heart trouble. So let's go on to number 7. What conclusions can you draw about Richard's character after reading sentence 4? So sentence 4 says, he had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. So conclusions that we could draw is that Richards, let's see, is careful and cares about Mrs. Mallard because he waited for the second confirmation of Mr. Mallard's death. So again, in the paragraph, it brought out that this was her husband's friend. So it does seem like that information and his actions shows that he cares about Mrs. Mallard. Okay, so number 8 is going to be based on another reading. So it says, read the ending to The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin and answer the following questions. Free. Body and soul free, she kept whispering. I should reread that. Free. Body and soul free, she kept whispering. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Luis opened the door. I beg, open the door. You will make yourself ill. What are you doing? It's Luis. For heaven's sake, open the door. So that's sentence 6 there. Go away, I'm not making myself ill. No, she was driving in a very elixir of life through that open window. Her fancy was running riot along those days ahead of her. Spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. She arose at length and opened the door to her sister's inopportunities. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Someone was opening the front door with a latchkey. It was Bentley Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of the accident and did not even know there had been one. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, at Richard's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of the joy that kills. So the question is, what is ironic about this situation? So if you remember, we talked about irony in class, how it's usually tricks the the reader. We don't expect, what we expect to happen doesn't happen, and something else that we don't expect to happen does. So for this, we could say that Mrs. Mallard believes her husband is dead, but he comes back alive. Her shock causes her to die herself. So that's definitely not what you would expect to have happened, and yet it did. Number 9, which sentence creates the most suspense and how does it do so? So you might remember we talked about what suspense means. Writers use it because it creates a rising curiosity or anxiety in the readers to build interest in a conflict. So this would probably be somewhere around sentence 17. It creates the most suspense because it piques the reader's interest and stretches out the action. So that's pretty much why the writer would use suspense. So the answer, sentence 17, creates the most suspense because it heightens, we can say, the reader's interest and stretches out the action. Okay, so number 10 is going to be the last one we do. What is one external conflict in the story of an hour? Which sentence gives you those details? So it would be Mrs. Mallard versus Mr. Mallard. Sentence 20 is free without him, but he turns out to be alive. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to answer that second one, or which sentence gives you those details. And, well, actually, the second one is the Mrs. Mallard versus Josephine. So we can continue our review in class.